Here's my coffee. Hello. I've been thinking a lot lately about why I'm having an easier time writing than I used to. I used to avoid writing anything serious, like I would write in my journal. Whenever I felt like it, I would write something, but if I ever was working on a bigger project, like a novel, I would just be crippled by fear. And I realized lately I've been writing without fear, and I wanted to know why that was. I wanted to know what's changed. And so I sat down last night and I came up with a list of 5 things that I think that I've been doing to help manage that fear. I felt like it might be helpful for other people to hear because that is one of the most common mistakes that I hear about from people who are trying to be published authors is the fear of failure, the fear of like, what if no one reads my book? What if no one wants to represent me? What if I get an agent and then no publishing house wants to actually publish the book? And it's scary. You're putting yourself out there. Most of the time you're pouring your heart out onto the page and then sending it to people for the sole purpose of getting feedback or getting critiques, and that can be really, really scary. So here are my 5 strategies for dealing with fear when writing. My first tip is to acknowledge the fear, but then do it anyway. I've always been a big believer that a healthy dose of fear is beneficial. It keeps our egos in check. It keeps us from doing stupid things like diving off of cliffs or wrestling tigers or jumping out of planes. So you need a little bit of fear, but you also can't let it control you. If you are sitting down to write and fear is at the forefront of your mind, you're either not going to be able to write or you're not going to write very effectively. Fear is one of those things that it's not going to go away. I remember growing up, I would always tell my mom the things I was afraid of. Like, I'm afraid that someone's going to sneak in during the night and kill me. I'm afraid that I'm going to get to school and all of my friends are going to hate me. Like, I just lived with a lot of fear, and she would always tell me, just don't be afraid. And I realized that's not realistic. If you're a fearful person, you're going to have to live with that fear, and you're gonna have to learn to work around it. And I think that by acknowledging it, telling it, I see that you're here, I recognize that you're here, but I'm gonna keep going, and you can follow along if you want, that's going to put you in control and let you have a better chance of writing. You kind of just have to learn to live with it. Like, it's always gonna be around. You don't like it, but you might as well learn to coexist with it. Like, when you're sitting down to the computer, it's gonna be sitting right next to you. But don't listen to him, because he's gonna be saying some crazy things, but you need to focus on your writing and what you wanna accomplish. No. My second tip for dealing with fear is to control your inner dialogue. By control your inner voice, I mean stop her when she gets too negative. This is a tip that I heard earlier this year and I thought it was crazy. I thought there was no way that I was going to be able to control that voice because it had been there forever. I have always had that inner voice that's told me, what you're writing is garbage, like you're never gonna publish this, no one's ever going to want to read this. But I tried it. It's kind of hard to catch it when it's like in the moment, but there was one particular instance where I realized I was being really, really hard on myself. I was saying some really terrible things to myself, and I just told myself to stop. Like, I interrupted that voice and I said stop. And it worked. And it was crazy because all of a sudden I had so much room in my mind for positive, constructive thoughts. And I'm not saying that that's worked every time. There have definitely been times when I've been talking negatively to myself and I haven't realized until later I should have cut it off. But it does help sometimes. And those are really important moments for me. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, I'm about to turn 30, and I'm wiser and I don't care as much what people think anymore. I don't know why all of this is happening now, but I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad that it's helping me be a more positive person, which in turn helps me be less fearful. The third thing that has really helped me manage my fear is creating attainable goals. And this is something that's also really helped me control my fear, because if my only goal is to get a book published, that's a huge goal, and there's a lot of fear that comes along with that goal, and there's really nothing to celebrate along the way. I finished the first draft, I'm still not to the publication point. I finished revisions, I'm still not to the publication point. Like, I have to have goals to celebrate along the way. So I try to make small, tiny goals that don't completely overwhelm me when I look at them. So, for example, my goal for today is to write 1,000 words. That is not a huge goal. I might surpass it, and that would be awesome, But if I don't and I just hit that 1,000-word mark, then at least I have something to celebrate. And it shows me I can do this. And once I have a bunch of those little goals met, my confidence will grow and I'll realize I'm actually doing this. I'm actually able to do this because I've accomplished all of these little things along the way. This is all something that sounds very common sense, but you have to be very cognizant of it. You have to be very aware of how you're treating your writing journey. Are you constantly reminding yourself that you're not there yet? Or are you celebrating the little milestones along the way? You have reassurance that you're on the right track, that you're doing the right thing. You need all the reassurance you can get. My fourth tip is avoid negative self-fulfilling prophecies. So a self-fulfilling prophecy is something that we either tell ourselves or someone tells us about our future that we internalize and believe and therefore make happen. For example, if someone in your life tells you you're never gonna publish a book, you're just not good enough for that, and you internalize it and it sticks with you in your mind while you're writing that book, it's probably going to come true that you're not going to publish it. And that is because you're working under the assumption the entire time that it's not going to happen. Just like if you walk into an interview for a job and you say, I'm going to blow this, I'm going to suck, they're going to hate me. Obviously, that's going to make you more likely to blow the interview because that's what you're thinking about when you're walking into it. So you have to be very careful about what you internalize, whether it be what other people tell you or what you tell yourself. If you do it right, you can have positive self-prophecies. You can wake up in the morning and put it out there in the universe, whether it's by saying it out loud or posting it on Twitter, that you are going to write 1,000 words today. And then by putting it out there, you're much more likely to do that. It's much easier to do that than to say, I'm never gonna find time to write today. Because then that's what you're thinking about all day, and you're probably not gonna find time to write that day. Our minds are really powerful, and one of the reasons that horoscopes and psychics are so successful is that we internalize things. We look at our horoscope for that week. If it says we're going to have a terrible week with our romantic relationships, we might self-sabotage and look for those negative moments or those cracks in the relationship and jump on them because that's what you're focusing on. So you just have to be very aware of what you're saying to yourself, what you're letting others say to you. You're gonna have people that are going to question why you're doing this, why you're wasting so much time on this. They're going to assume that you're not going to be able to do it for a number of reasons. Maybe you've always been super quiet and they doubt your skill. Maybe you have a full-time job or kids and you don't have a lot of time and people just don't see how you're gonna get it done. But they're not psychics, they don't know your future. You can't let them be right. Again, just like number one, you are in control. It takes a whole lot of work and a whole lot of practice, but you are in control. Number 5 is about expectations. Raise your expectations from failure to moderate success. I'm not saying full-blown success because you should never expect to be the next J.K. Rowling. I'm a big believer that it's actually easier for us to mentally handle failure than it is to mentally handle success. And the reason for this is a lot of us expect failure. We know how to deal with it. We've dealt with it in the past. It's an easy concept to grapple with because it's so common. Success, on the other hand, can often be a lot scarier. When you succeed, it's easy to freak out and not understand why you succeeded. Whether it be if you get a job that you really wanted, if you have a YouTube channel that all of a sudden is gaining followers, or a video that's blowing up, or if you find an agent or you find a publisher for your book. Those are all things that can be really scary. And when I'm in these situations, which I'm not often because, like I said, failure is more common than success, I always think about, like, they made a mistake. They don't know yet. Like when I've gotten teaching jobs where I know at least 5 other people have been interviewed and I'm chosen, I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't know what they just did. Like, how am I going to live up to this? They chose me out of a pool of 6 people, why me? I put a lot of pressure on myself because of that. Because as much as we work for something and as much effort and heart we've put into something, it's still really, really overwhelming to have people recognize it as something that is good. But that doesn't mean that we need to settle for failure. It makes me think a lot about the book that I was working on last year and how many drafts I did. I got to a point where I felt like it was getting there, like it was getting to be the final picture that I envisioned it to be. And then I just stopped. And I think part of that was I was just not ready at that point to send it out to anyone. I wasn't ready to query it or look for agents. I just wasn't mentally prepared for the possibility of success, which sounds so weird, but it's true. Now I'm more confident in my writing. I'm closer to that point, so it's less scary to think about. Writing has been easier. I hope this is making sense because it made a lot of sense when I was thinking about it. I had like an epiphany, but I'm hoping some of you can relate to that. And all these techniques are things that I work on daily. But I will say that working on these things has been paying off. The most important thing to remember when you're starting out is that fear is gonna be there. Acknowledge it, but then just keep going. Remember that you are in control of it, and that will make all the difference. So I wanted to thank you guys so much for watching. I really, truly appreciate it, and I will see you next week.